Welcome back to the Grease Goblins Rereads channel. Today's video, we're going to be doing a very big chapter. We're hitting Tyrion 9, A Clash of Kings. And for you guys that don't know, this is basically the Riot chapter, where everything goes into chaos, everything picks up in the story as we're hitting the back end of A Clash of Kings. And Tyrion from here only goes up, with the prelude to the Battle of the Blackwater, as well as the actual Battle of the Blackwater itself, some of the best moments of A Clash of Kings. And this chapter is no exemption from that. We see a ton in this chapter. We're going to talk about all of it in today's video. We're going to go through Myrcella's departure to Dorne, going through the riot and really the state of King's Landing, the fallout of this huge event that has massive repercussions, and it doesn't even end there. We don't stop at the riot because we keep going as we have a little bit of a mini council meeting between Jaqen Bywater, Bronn, Varys, and Tyrion. So let's start on page 441 and get the chapter going, as it is a long one. We start page 441 with Myrcella Baratheon remaining composed and regal as she begins to depart for Dorne, showing courage and proper decorum for a young, basically, princess. And Myrcella is so interesting because she's very different than Joffrey and Tommen. Of the three, she seems the most brave, the most, I don't know, almost normal. I would say Tommen is more normal, like how a kid would be, but like Myrcella gives you a much more matured vibe to the character, almost kind of like Arya. And so you look at this character of Myrcella, where she's being shipped to Dorne, a place that's very hostile to the Lannisters. It will be something for most young women that would definitely set them on edge. Also, you're traveling in the open sea with Stannis almost coming to the city at some point. It's a really tough spot. Her younger brother Tommen weeps at the parting, while Myrcella offers him comfort, reflecting once again her strength and also her understanding for her brother. She's definitely the more kind of the three. Tyrion watches the farewell from the war galley King Robert's Hammer, which leads her naval escort that also includes Lionstar, Boldwyn, and Lady Lyanna. Tyrion is not taking any shortcuts here. He's sending Myrcella with a very large fleet, or at least a large fleet in terms of how much power Tyrion currently has as a navy. And this might be interesting because you might be thinking, should Tyrion really be doing this? He's getting rid of, 4 pretty good ships, 5 if you include the ship that Myrcella is on herself. Should he be doing that, given the fact that Stannis is about to be coming to King's Landing? Now, Tyrion doesn't know exactly when because Storm's End is still holding out. But the problem here is Tyrion realizes if the city is breached, if the walls are breached, the city is going to fall very quickly. And so you would be thinking, well, the Navy be very important to that. Now, we know from what Tyrion's going to do later, that's not necessarily the case. The Navy is not nearly as important as some of the other things like the Wildfire and the Chain are to the actual war effort. He feels uneasy about sending away such a large portion of their already weakened fleet, especially after losses to Stannis at Dragonstone. Stannis had taken a bulk majority of the fleet from King's Landing as he was the master of ships and was having them at Dragonstone. So you have a situation where, as we started the book, the one thing that Stannis did have was naval power, especially given the fact that on the east, you had the Red Wine fleet that was kind of right now out of the war because of the hostages Cersei had. Stannis really had power at that. He just didn't have the most amount of men. However, Cersei insisted on a strong escort to ensure Myrcella's safety. Her capture will destroy the alliance with Dorne. And I do think it's correct. If you're going to try and make an alliance with Dorne, with sending Myrcella to them, you want it to actually work, and you want it for her to be safe. And so I think I look at that situation, I go, yeah, that makes a total good amount of sense, even with the war effort not going well, and you might be thinking, we need as much manpower as we can. I do think it makes more sense to try and get the Dornish alliance. It's better for the long term, but you also got to be thinking, we might not get to the long term if King's Landing falls. Prince Doran Martell has only called his banners so far, but once Myrcella is safely in Sunspear, he promised to move his forces to the passes, a strategic bluff meant to pressure the Marshal Lords and make Stannis hesitate before advancing north. And we know this actually is the case. In the next chapter we get with Davos and Davos 2, another fantastic chapter, we know that this is actually the case, and that it does give Stannis a little bit of pause, but it isn't something where he's like, oh, the Dornish are going to invade the Stormlands. It's more like he wants to get through Storm's End as quickly as possible, secure his rear before he then goes attacks King's Landing. He's not necessarily worried about the Dornish invading like the rest of Westeros. As we get into page 442. Tyrion knows the Martells will not commit to open battle unless Dorne itself is attacked. Tyrion recognizes Stannis is too cautious for that, though some of his bannermen may not be. Tyrion is thinking about, maybe I can sow a little bit of discourse in Stannis' ranks, but I think I look at this and I go, if you're the Martells, there's no reason to commit to attacking Stannis because, well, Stannis and the Martells would have around the same amount of forces. Stannis would probably be a little bit favored. Also, with how great of a military commander Stannis is, it makes no sense for Dorne to attack Stannis openly. And so, yeah, it is just a feint. It's to make Stannis a little bit on edge, and maybe some of his bannermen a bit more fearful to leave their lands to then attack King's Landing. The captain of King Robert's hammer confirms the route, as he's been instructed to hug the coast to Crackclaw Point, then sail to Braavos, avoiding any sight of Dragonstone. They are very much taking the safe approach. This is not about speed. It's not about getting Myrcella to Dorne as quickly as possible. It's about getting there as best as they can without having some sort of sea conflict. If attacked, the escort will protect the Sea Swift, the ship that Myrcella is going to be on, while others fight or flee. The Sea Swift is fast enough to likely escape pursuit. As it's more of a smaller vessel built upon speed, it's not made necessarily for war, so Myrcella likely, even if conflict did happen, she likely could get away. Sir Aerys Oakheart, another of the King's Guard who we'll see later on in A Feast for Crows, will serve as Myrcella's sworn shield, and Braavosi allies will take her from Braavos to Sunspear. Tyrion chose the longer northern sea route through Braavos over a direct voyage south for safety, hoping to avoid confrontation with Stannis' fleet, which is very smart. It's a number of things. One, it's going to get another faction involved in Braavos, so if Stannis openly attacks a guest of the Braavosi, then that invites the free cities to get involved in the conflict. It's not something you want to do. I think of this as like, say, the American Civil War, where the American Civil War, if you're President Lincoln, sorry if you're not American, by the way, but more or less the idea of that war was you want to keep out European nations, you want to keep out other nations of recognizing the Confederacy as an actual nation and keeping them out of it, so you do certain things to avoid that. Same kind of thing here. If you're Stannis, you don't want Braavos giving a bunch of support to Tyrion and the Lannisters when you already, seeming like right now, have them beaten. He notes that Stannis is still besieging Storm's End, where Sir Courtney Penrose holds out in Renly's name, buying more time for the escape. And this is really, really important because at this moment, you can't predict what's going to happen. That Sir Courtney Penrose is going to be assassinated, and Stannis is going to take the castle in a manner of more or less a couple days. That is key to understanding, because if Sir Courtney Penrose was to hold out for, say, a year or more, that's huge, because Tywin, that's plenty of time to deal with what's going on in the West with Robb at the moment. It's enough time for Tyrion to prepare and continue to build up his forces. Now, albeit, if this conflict went on for another year, the city would have even less food and would be in much more of a state of possibly going into a civil war within the city. That's a whole different discussion. But as of right now, Stannis besieging Storm's End is key to the war. Tyrion's winch towers for the harbor chain defense are nearly complete. He just needs 2 more weeks to finish preparations for defending King's Landing. He is really banking on the fact that Sir Courtney Penrose can hold out for just a little bit longer. And we know that will be the case. He's going to hold out for like another day or two. I'm not exactly sure on the timeline, but when we get to Davos 1, that chapter literally lasts for like a day. We do know that Stannis has been at Storm's End for a good amount of time. So I will say this, Tyrion should be feeling pretty good that his defense will at least be ready for when Stannis attacks. The High Septon gives Myrcella a public blessing, to which Tyrion is unimpressed. He's growing impatient with the pomp and formality. And the thing with the High Septon is the High Septon very much does not seem to be somebody that actually cares about the faith. He seems very corrupt, all that stuff. And so Tyrion just doesn't care about this speech that he's giving because he realizes this is not like a true believer. If you've ever been to church and maybe you've had a pastor or somebody that's in charge of the church that just doesn't feel like they truly care. They're more about, the job or the influence that they have. That's kind of the way the High Septon feels like. And especially, I want to put this into the perspective of the people. So the people at this point are starving to death. They are on the brink of collapse. You're having children being killed because they're just starving. There's no food to be had. And you see this High Septon who's overly fat, that does not seem to care about the people, he's not doing any charity, anything to try and help the people. It's going to lead to what we see later in this chapter, but I want to point that out here. But before Myrcella can depart, Tyrion promises the captain a knighthood if he delivers Myrcella safely to Braavos. And Tyrion is banking a lot on this trip, and he's trying to sweeten it up as much as he can. As we get into page 443, Tyrion disembarks from Robb's hammer. He feels the resentment of the starving small folk watching him. Fed, rich, and deformed, Tyrion stands as a symbol for them to hate. Tyrion not only is being discriminated because of his own disadvantages, you also have to remember Tyrion at this point comes from the richest house. Tyrion is the person really in charge, and all the issues that people are going through, they're going to blame Tyrion. Now, Tyrion doesn't really understand that he's the person that they fully hate at this point, but he's going to figure that out by the end of the chapter, and it's something that's really interesting. But it also goes to show that Tyrion understands the way people feel. Tyrion understands that this needs to get done quickly, and they need to get back to the castle as soon as possible. They are vulnerable here. Yes, they have the gold cloaks, all that kind of stuff, but when people get desperate and they have nothing left to live for, they're watching their children die, they're slowly starving to death, they're willing to do radical actions. And that's what plays out in this chapter. And Tyrion understands that completely. Bronn escorts him through the crowd to where Cersei and the other royal family stand. She pointedly ignores Tyrion and fawns over Lancel. Cersei is very unimpressed by Tyrion because Tyrion is having her daughter sent away to Dorne, a place where it's very dangerous for a Lannister, and she's not very happy with Tyrion at this moment. Tyrion is amused by Cersei's secret dealings, as he knows Cersei's secrets. Not only does she know the secrets that Cersei's been doing in the background with the Kettleblacks, but she also knows her secret with Lancel. But Cersei has been visiting the High Septon as cover, and then secretly meeting Sir Osmond Kettleblack and his brothers to build her own sellsword force. She's trying to do more or less what Bronn has been doing. But unbeknownst to her, Tyrion has Lancel feeding him all of this information, and he's outmatching her, paying the same mercenaries double to ensure their loyalty stays with him. Once again, Tyrion is just checkmating Cersei at every single, place. All these men that she believes are hers and her backing, and this secret police force that she's thinking she has, really is Tyrion's. Now, we know that they're not actually Tyrion's, they're actually Littlefingers instead, so if you're the Kettleblacks, you're getting paid by both Lannister factions and Littlefinger, so you're just rolling in the cash at this point, and you just see the game that's played in King's Landing. Tyrion views the Kettleblacks as flashy frauds, more show than substance, hollow instruments meant to impress Cersei, but truly useless in a fight. The Kettleblacks are not necessarily the best fighters, not the people you want in a war, but they are people that are good at deceiving and things of that nature. They fit into King's Landing quite perfectly. Lionstar and Lady Lyanna set off first, making way for Sea Swift, and Tyrion insisted on plain sails to avoid drawing attention. As Myrcella waves from the deck as Sir Aerys Oakheart stands guard behind her in white cloak, Tommen cries, and this earns scorn from Joffrey. And if you're Tom and you're watching your sister leave, who the two seem to have a great relationship, and you never know when you're going to see Myrcella again. Who knows if she's even going to make it to Dorne at all. It's a tense situation. Sansa gently defends Tommen, citing historical knights who cried with honor and sorrow, talking about Aemon and when Nerys and Aegon actually got married, and a lot of people speculated how Aemon actually was in love with his sister Nerys in terms of not like a brother-sister relationship, and also citing the Cargill twins during the House of the Dragon / Dance of the Dragons time period, and how they died as each one of them were killed because of giving each other a wound. We don't know if that's necessarily the case. I love the way the House of the Dragon did that sequence. I believe that's basically the canon route of it now at this point. But it's not confirmed in Fire and Blood, so can't really say much on that. Joffrey then threatens her with violence, again showing his cruelty, as Tyrion notes Cersei's indifference and questions how could she be so blind to her son's nature. Now, I think this is a very interesting question. I think that Joffrey is not somebody that Cersei just overlooks and doesn't understand that he is a horrible person. I think she understands to a degree that Joffrey is not a pleasant kid. He's not a pleasant boy. But it's still her firstborn child. She still cares about him because of those things. I just don't think Cersei is a good mother. I don't think that she cares about, Joffrey being spoiled and kind of cruel, because she herself is also those things. Now, Joffrey is more explicit, but where do you think he gets some of those things? He gets some of those things from his mother. As we get into page 444. Boldwind and King Robert's hammer follow Sea Swift out into the bay, completing the escort fleet for Myrcella. Tyrion had selected only captains Varys vouched for, but he still feels uneasy relying on the spider. Exactly. These men are being vouched for by Varys, somebody that you don't know what game he's playing at. I also want to note Varys is suspiciously not here. When everyone else from the court and all the important people in King's Landing are here, Varys is absent. And even when we talk about this later on, Varys is very shifty about what he was doing during this period. And it's going to leave a lot of people to think Varys was doing some very suspicious things right here. But he reflects on his dependence on Varys and wishes for his own informers, though he admits he wouldn't trust them either. And that's the game you play when you're at King's Landing. You can't trust anyone. It's a hard life. It kind of reminds you of maybe like organized crime or the mafia in our own history, in terms of how you can never trust anyone, the infighting going on, and that it kind of reminds you of King's Landing. Now, I will say another thing. Tyrion describes exactly why Varys is so important, why he hasn't been changed, why someone like Aerys became completely dependable on him, and how that broke, I think, some of his mental faculties, and how Robert kept him in place, and now Tyrion is doing the same thing. So Tyrion is concerned a lot about that, but he's also concerned about the silence from Littlefinger. We talked about in Tyrion 8, Tyrion and Littlefinger conjured up this plan to get the Tyrells involved into the fold, and them marrying Joffrey to Margaery. But there's been radio silence, and Varys had suggested that Peter may be dead, but Tyrion finds that laughable, believing it more likely that Tyrells are stalling. Which I do believe to be the case at the moment. If you're the Tyrells, why jump into bed with Joffrey when you're not sure how things are going to go right now? Tywin is in the west. As of right now, it really would just be the Tyrells versus Stannis. So if you're the Tyrells, that's not intriguing because the Lannisters don't necessarily have a lot to offer. Now, do they have a lot to offer in terms of you're going to be on the throne? Yes, but you're going to lose a lot if you are yourself, just the Tyrell faction is fighting Stannis and Tywin's not helping. So that's the one thing that I would be very much worried about. The farewell procession leaves the docks, led by the City Watch and Sir Jacqueline Bywater with a column of mounted lancers. Sir Aaron Santagar and Sir Balon Swan ride with the king's banners, followed by King Joffrey in a grey palfrey, crowned and proud. But think about how rich Joffrey looks. Think about how rich this party looks. People are suffering. They're starving. And here is the royal family and all these other people flaunting their wealth and their privilege. Sansa Stark rides beside Joffrey, quiet and composed, guarded by Sandor Clegane, who is on the left of the king, and Sir Mandon Moore on the right of Sansa. That is their protection guard. It's very important to understand, as we'll see later on. Prince Tommen follows behind, still teary-eyed, with Sir Preston Greenfield, as Queen Cersei rides Lancel and is protected by Sir Meryn Trant and Sir Boris Blunt. Tyrion rides along his sister, and behind them trail the High Septon and his litter, followed by a crowd of nobles, the usual suspects like Giles Rosby and Jalbar Exo. Don't know if that's exactly how you say his name, but those people, right? Your more minor people. For instance, you also have Lady Tanda and her daughter. And this then ends with a double column of guardsmen. So you understand the layout of this party. You have the most important people in the front, and as you kind of go back, you have people of less importance. And that's very important to understand as we get later on in the chapter. As we get into page 445, Tyrion still is sensing the deep unrest in the city. As the royal procession climbs Aegon's Hill, the unwashed crowds glare with quiet fury. And you can sense it. You can see that the city is very changed. Normally, people might be hailing Joffrey or, hailing the royal party or making more noise or any of those things, but it seems almost like a ghost town. Everybody is just staring at them, and there seems to be this unspoken fury from the crowd. Bronn has sellswords planted in the crowd to prevent trouble, but Tyrion doubts that they'll help if violence erupts. And remember, as much as sellswords can be useful, this is thousands and thousands of people all along this road back to the Red Keep. Sellswords are not going to help. They have the numbers. That's something that we always talk about, that the people, when they understand their power and they're motivated by, desperation or, courage or these other things, they have more people. They can overwhelm the royal party. They can overwhelm the Gold Cloaks. And that's what happens in this chapter. And so you see that going on, that yes, this might be a nice precautionary thing, but it's not going to save them if a violence breaks out. Despite a few cheers of Joffrey all hail, most people remain silent. The resentment is palpable. They're seeing this show of this royal party and their lavish life, and they sit there bitterly. And they're not at the point yet where they're willing to assault, the king or any of those things, but you feel it. You feel the building tension of the chapter as it all starts to unravel, as a grieving mother breaks through the line, as we see one of the most frightening scenes of the entire book, one of the darkest moments, as a mother holds her dead, swollen baby aloft in front of the king. Joffrey almost rides her down, but Sansa says something that changes his mind. Joffrey has no care for the problems of the small folk and the people living in King's Landing, and this woman who, hasn't even been able to feed her child, she raises her dead child. She doesn't know what to even do with the body. She's so outraged, so broken down. And what does Joffrey do? Joffrey wants to ride her down. But instead, even after Sansa is able to maybe convince him not to, all he can do is toss a silver stag, which bounces away off the body and triggers a scuffle among the desperate crowd. The woman stands motionless, trembling, almost too shocked to speak of how this pampered and spoiled king is treating this woman. This is a woman who's lost her child, and what can Joffrey do is basically avoid riding her down and just throwing money at her. It's a horrifying moment, and it's made even worse by Cersei, who Cersei coldly tells Joffrey to leave her. She's beyond our help. This could have totally been avoided if no words had been said, if maybe even some courtesies had been said by Joffrey or Cersei saying, things will get better. It is to blame, we should blame Stannis for this, or blame the Tyrells because they've blocked food from coming into the city. Try and, get out of it a little bit. But instead, you publicly almost humiliate or talk down to this poor woman who's lost her child. And the mother then snaps. She seems to be broken out of the shock, filled with rage. She calls Cersei a whore and a kingslayer's whore and other slanders. She drops her child and curses Cersei repeatedly. Now, what does this remind you of? This reminds you of what we're going to see in A Dance with Dragons when Cersei does her Walk of Atonement. It's kind of this little ripple here that you see with this moment. It's why I love this chapter so much, because not only is it a great standalone chapter with its own story to tell, it foreshadows so many events to come in the story, and there's still mysteries about this event that we just don't know. This then gets the chaos to erupt. This felt like the moment where it showed how the upper class don't care about the people. They don't care that their innocents are dying and that children are being starved to death in the streets. And someone hurls dung that hits Joffrey in the face. Tyrion was never sure where this actually came from or who did it, but this sparks Joffrey into rage and to do some very stupid actions. Furious, Joffrey screams for the culprit and offers 100 gold dragons for their capture. And people hearing this, they might spark up and go, "Oh, I saw them. Yeah, give me that money so I can go get food and bread and stuff like that." And it shows that, oh, they're willing to just give away 100 gold dragons just like that, and they can't buy us food. That's what I'd be thinking. If I was somebody in the crowd and I hadn't eaten anything in days, and I see this pampered king just offering 100 gold dragons, more than I'm going to make in my entire life, just to find someone who threw some dung while we're in the middle of a starvation, right? There's no food coming into the city. As we get into page 446, the crowd descends into chaos as someone falsely acclaims the dung throwers on a nearby rooftop. People begin pointing, pushing, and cursing. Joffrey is enraged by this and demands the person be brought to him to lick it off or face beheading. He sends the Hound into the mob, worsening the panic. He tells the Hound basically to cut through them and to just find the person that it is. It shows so much to the public that that Joffrey is willing to just cut them down for some meaningless thing like this, and it makes the crowd erupt. This is the breaking point. The people finally have had enough, and they begin to surge into chaos. Tyrion tries to stop the madness, knowing the man is long gone and that violence is imminent. Again, if you're in a situation, you want to try and bring the intensity back down, not increase it. You're never going to find this person that threw this dung at Joffrey. There's too many people around. The person's long gone. They know what they did. The Hound, all he's doing is he's going to start creating violence to where the people fight back. The crowd then begins to erupt into fury, hurling even more insults, not just at Cersei or Joffrey, but even to Tyrion himself, calling them bastard, freak, half-man, all sorts of things, and even more begin to cry for justice and loyalty to either Robb, Stannis, and even Renly, who is dead. But again, the people don't maybe necessarily know that, and they might not even believe that. The mob begins chanting for food, and that's the heart of it. These people don't necessarily care who's on the throne, but they want to be treated right. They want to be treated, with at least some sort of respect, to be able to live their lives and just to, have basic human needs of food, shelter, things of that nature. Recognizing the danger, Tyrion orders a retreat as Cersei nods and Sir Jaqen Bywater forms a lance wedge to clear a path. Joffrey panics as people grab at him. One seizes his leg briefly before Sir Mandon Moore severs the hand. And this is so stupid. You are in the middle of a riot. You are overwhelmed. There are more people than you have swords or protectors, whatever. You can't defend from this. And so what do? Instead of maybe pushing the person's hand away, you cut their hand off. This is a person looking for bread. Right now, there's not been really any violence yet. There's been dung thrown, but it's reassessing the situation. Now people are going, these people are slaughtering us. They're going to cut off our hands. Joffrey's already ordered the Hound to start killing people. We need to fight back. And it's going to boil that anger to where these people do horrible actions that really Joffrey causes. Tyrion slaps Joffrey's horse, forcing it to rear and charge forward, scattering the crowd as Tyrion and Bronn race from behind. It's interesting to note, what if Tyrion had never done this? If Tyrion had never done this and taken charge and gotten Joffrey going, there's a possibility Joffrey would have been killed here. That's the intensity of the chapter, how things could have changed. The retreat becomes a desperate flight, dodging stones and rotten food amidst the chaos. As people are surging forward, some people are stripped from their horses. Things are going wrong. As we get into page 447, the mob crushes 3 gold cloaks. The Hound disappears as he wasn't on his horse. Remember, Joffrey ordered him to get down off his horse, and so at this point, the Hound is missing, his riderless horse fleeing alongside the party. Sir Aaron Santagar is pulled from his horse, and his Baratheon banner is torn from his grasp. Sir Balon Swan drops the Lannister banner to draw his sword, but the Lion Stander is shredded and lost in the chaos. It's evoking into madness. Violence has already been done, and now the people are fighting back. Joffrey tramples someone in the madness. Tyrion has no idea who. If this was even a child, who knows? The royal party finally breaks free and enters the safety of the castle gates, where spearmen and crossbowmen stand ready. Yes, some of the royal party has escaped, but this damage has been done. There are multiple people in the party that are not accounted for, and the city is in terms of breaking. Will this be the end of the control for the Lannisters And will the city divulge into chaos? It gives you a lot of vibes of, again, I want to say big spoiler warning for House of the Dragon, of things that happen in Fire and Blood if you've not read the book, of what we see happen in King's Landing during Rhaenyra's reign, and then her actual, fleeing from the castle. It reminds you a lot of that, of the desperation of the castle and the people taking action into their own hands. Inside the castle wall, Tyrion sees Sir Mandon Moore helping a pale and shaken Joffrey dismount. Cersei, Tommen, and Lancel arrive with their guards, and Sir Borros's blade is bloodied. Sir Meryn's cloak has been ripped off completely. The Kingsguard have done a terrible job protecting the party. They've done a terrible job in taking violence and making the situation worse. Sir Balon Swan rides in without a helmet, and Lady Tonda arrives half-mad with worry for her daughter, Lawless, who is left behind. And we know the horrible atrocities that happened to Lawless, and you can understand your daughter is missing in this riot, and things likely mean that she might die, or even worse things that could give somebody trauma for the rest of their life. Lord Giles reports that the High Septon was thrown from his litter and overtaken by the mob. Jalabar Exo believes he saw Sir Preston Greenfield riding back to help, but isn't sure. We know both of these people will be killed quite brutally. I would say especially the High Septon, but we'll check on that a little bit later. A maester checks on Tyrion, but he brushes him off and confronts Joffrey, who's raving about traitors. Joffrey doesn't seem to think that he's responsible for any of this, that these people are traitors, they're horrible, all this stuff. And Tyrion can't swallow it anymore. Everything Tyrion's been doing, trying to keep the city together the whole book, and Joffrey is seen basically blowing it all up. How incompetent can he truly be? And this is a moment that will be remembered for the rest of the series. It's one of the most satisfying moments of the entire series. I actually think that the show did a really good job of the dialogue Tyrion gets in this moment, but in the book, it's more brutal. You understand why later on we see the trial of Tyrion killing Joffrey, why so many people believe it that don't necessarily know Tyrion that well, because of this moment. Enraged, Tyrion slaps Joffrey so hard his crown flies off, then shoves him to the ground and kicks him again, calling him a spoiled, witless boy who got men killed for his own arrogance. Joffrey got so many people killed, whether it's, innocent people, whether it's people in the crowd, whether it's people in the party. Joffrey has screwed up and set the city on the brink of breaking. As we get into page 448, Sir Mandon Moore pulls Tyrion off Joffrey as Bronn steps in to hold Tyrion back as Cersei rushes to her son. Sir Balon restrains Sir Lancel, and the party is, again, in a really tough spot because not only are the people outside turning on the Lannisters, but the Lannisters themselves are turning on each other. Tyrion demands to know who is still outside the gates, as Lady Tonda begs for someone to find her daughter Lawless. Sir Boros notes that Sir Preston Greenfield and Sir Aeron Centagar are also missing. As Sir Horace reports, that Tyrick Lannister, who is mockingly called Wet Nurse, is also unaccounted for, and someone we will never find. We still don't know what happened to Tyrick Lannister. Is he dead? Is he captive right now? We don't know, and that's why a lot of people believe that this could have been Varys. Varys could have set a lot of this in motion. He isn't here. It seems like he knew what was going to happen, which is not exactly surprising. I mean, think about the state of the city and the likelihood of this happening. Could Varys have influenced it? Yes. Varys could very easily have planted a couple people to be instigators in breaking this whole thing. Something we talk about even in today's world when we think about protests. For whatever they're protesting, all it takes is somebody that's an instigator wanting to create chaos to spark conflict throughout the whole thing. And we see that with things like during the MLK movement, the civil rights, stuff we still see today. There are people that can ruin good, peaceful protests, things of that nature. Same idea could be here. Varys could have planted people to throw the dung on Joffrey. That instigates Joffrey to go into a rage, which Varys would obviously know would happen. So there's a lot here that's very interesting, and it's something we'll talk about a little bit later in the chapter as well. But at this, Tyrion realizes something even more detrimental. Sansa Stark is missing. This is a key captive. They've already lost Arya. They don't know what happened to her. And now the last Stark girl possibly could be killed or whatever could be happening to her right now. That would mean the death of Jaime. Joffrey claims she was beside him, but doesn't know where she went. And Sir Mandon Moore, who was the guard to Sansa, has no explanation either, because when the Hound was, off of his horse, he said that his main concern was Joffrey. But I want to point this out. Joffrey was very likely could have been killed because he was in a panic, and Sir Manamor did not take this upon himself to, drive Joffrey forward. It was Tyrion who had to do that. So Manamor, very incompetent, a moron. You need to protect who you believe is the future queen in Sansa, and Sir Manamor just does a terrible job. Tyrion orders Boros and Meryn to find Sansa and Lollys, and Boros hesitates, fearing the mob. Remember this, you are the King's Guard. You are to serve the king and the hand and the queen, all of that, without question. Your life is for them. And it just shows you so much about who these King's Guard are. Could you imagine Sir Barristan, declining that because he's afraid? Sir Barristan or, any of the other great King's Guard, it just shows you how far the King's Guard have fallen. And Tyrion has just had enough. He's had enough of this. He curses Boros, threatening him with Shaga, and Boros raises his sword, but Bronn shields Tyrion. And this is for one of the few times of the entire series of even Tyrion's life Cersei has had enough as well. She stands up for Tyrion and orders Boros to obey or be replaced. But at this, Joffrey spots Sansa. And of course, the Hound is the only one to actually give a crap about her, returning with her riding behind him. It really builds up that, again, duo of Sansa and the Hound. How the Hound is willing to risk his life even for Sansa, as she is innocent in all of this and is being used as a puppet, and the Hound, whether he doesn't say so, does feel bad. Sansa is bloodied but alive. She describes how the mob attacked her, throwing rocks, filth, and eggs. A man tried to drag her off her horse, and Sandor killed him by severing his arm. Now, the show actually went even further with this. They kind of tried to combine Sansa in the book with Lollys in the book, where there's a situation in which the show presents Sansa possibly getting sexually assaulted or attacked, and the Hound saves her from that. I think that's an interesting choice. I like the way the book does it better, just because Sansa is a young girl and she's experiencing so much already as it is that I don't think we needed that. So I thought that was always an interesting change. And I do want to talk about when we get done with the Clash of Kings, which probably won't be till next year, probably in around February or March. I do want to talk about season 2 because rereading A Clash of Kings has made me not like season 2 as much as I used to. I used to be much more higher on season 2, and there's just so many of these little subtle differences from the season 2 to the book that really lose the meaning of the book. So just a little side tangent, but let's continue into page 449. Clegane's cloak is torn and stained. His arm is bleeding. He reports that Sir Aaron Santigar was killed by 4 men with cobblestones, as Clegane killed one but couldn't save Santigar. Lady Tanda begs for news of her daughter Lollys, but the Hound says he never saw her and angrily demands his horse. The Hound cares more for his horse than a lot of these other people that treat him like crap and all of this other stuff. Even when the Hound has just saved Sansa, saved all their asses, he gets no thanks. He gets no praise for this. He's just ordered around again. At this, a cry is heard as Flea Bottom is now on fire. The city is devolving into chaos. And for Tyrion, this is even more worrisome, because if a fire could spread all the way to the Alchemist's Guild Hall, that could mean the whole city going up in flame. Tyrion immediately takes control as Bronn takes as many men as needed to protect the water wagons. He prioritizes guarding the Guild Hall of the Alchemists above all else due to the wildfire stock there, and you could understand that. You could have an Aerys situation if that fire is to reach there. He then turns to his most other competent man and orders Clegane to go with Bronn. He notices a flash of fear in the Hound's eyes, as we know Clegane hates fire due to his past trauma, of course, but Clegane at this point agrees to go, but insists he's doing it to find his horse, not for Tyrion. And that's going to really spring up later when we see how the Hound reacts to the Battle of the Blackwater, but the Hound is growing more and more tired and frustrated with the ruling class. Tyrion tells the 3 remaining Kingsguard to escort heralds through the city, commanding citizens to return to their homes, and any man found out after the evenfall, Bell will be executed. And once again, the Kingsguard cannot take a simple command. Just try and make the city more peaceful. Do your jobs as a Kingsguard member. Sir Meryn protests, saying their place is with the king. And remember, Tyrion is the hand of the king. He is the person speaking with all the power of the king, as Joffrey is not at this point at an age to be the king. This is basically disregarding a direct command from the king. That's what that is. And Cersei backs this up. And again, I think it's really interesting because you see that even in this moment of turmoil, it does unite Cersei and Tyrion a little bit because of the incompetence going around. But Cersei cuts in, declaring Tyrion speaks with the king's authority and disobedience is treason, just like I talked about. And Sir Meryn Moore, we know how much of it he's a moron, he's self-serving, he's all of that stuff. And you're going to see that by the end of the book, but it just shows you how far the King's Guard has fallen. And Sir Boris asks if they should wear their white cloaks, and Cersei snaps they can go naked if they like. After how they behaved, the mob won't respect them anyway. It's so crazy because the Knights of the King's Guard used to be this order that the people would look at as like these legendary figures, the best of the best, the most noble, all of that type of stuff. And now you look at how they are now. They're men that just instantly go to violence, protecting their own skins, inflaming the riots. They are not what they used to be. And that's a lot what you see with Barristan and why he reflects so poorly on the Kingsguard now. And Tyrion doesn't even want to argue with her anymore. His head is throbbing and he thinks he can smell the smoke. He wants it done and he's tired of being disobeyed. And at this, we then get to Tyrion going back to the Tower of the Hand. He orders 2 of the Stone Crows to find Timett, son of Timett. As we get into page 450, a Stone Crow refuses to go after the burned men, saying, "Stone Crows do not run, squeaking after burned men." Tyrion he's going through all this situation. The city is in turmoil. They might lose control of it. Stannis is, right about to come to King's Landing, even though he's still sieging Storm's End. All of this stuff. And now he's got to remember he has the politics of the Mountain Men. Tyrion, frustrated, tells him to find Shagga instead, but he's told Shagga is asleep, as Tyrion insists to wake him, of course, as there's stuff that needs to be done. The clansman reluctantly agrees, warning that Shagga's wrath is fearsome. Shagga arrives yawning and scratching, and Tyrion mocks his laziness as the city burns. But Shagga blames the weak ale and sour wine for his headache, which, I can't blame him. If you've gone from living in a life where you're living out in the mountains, you don't have good alcohol, and then all of a sudden you go to the city and it just gets to you. I get you, Shagga. I get you. And, wine is a great delicacy. So I get him totally. Tyrion orders Shagga to go to Shae at the manse near the Iron Gate and to keep her safe. Shagga offers to bring Shae to the tower instead, but Tyrion tells him only to protect her and reassure her he will come when he can, tonight or tomorrow. And the real situation is Tyrion doesn't know how much longer the city is going to be able to hold, so he wants his most important pieces with Shae. Evenfall comes and the city remains unstable despite Bronn reporting the fires are out and mobs are dispersed. Tyrion longs to see Shae but cannot leave. Even though the city has been quelled for now, it won't be quelled much longer, and that's what Jaqen Bywater is going to report with his casualty report from the riot. He notes that the High Septon was torn apart while begging the gods for mercy, and Tyrion reflects the starving have no patience for a fat priest. Everything I talked about earlier, it's the frustration of everything Joffrey does. It's the anger that builds up, the desperation, and here you see this fat Septon praying to the gods who isn't helping the people at all. He's not offering any type of, aid to them or donations or volunteering to help them in the situation. And so they kill him. And it's quite awful the way he dies. We see Sir Breston Greenfield, who is brutally stabbed and hacked, so mutilated the gold cloaks didn't even recognize him at first. And then Sir Aaron Santigar found in a gutter, his head crushed to a pulp inside his helmet. It's brutal the way this went down. These common people don't have swords and things of that nature. They're forced to do blunt force and things of that nature. Lady Tonda's daughter Lawless was sexually assaulted by dozens of men behind a tanner's shop and was found wandering naked on Sow Belly Row. It's horrible what's going on. People being attacked and all this stuff, but you totally understand it from the people's point of view. It's frustration. It's watching your loved ones die. having no respite. It's being scared of the impending invasion that's going to happen with Stannis and the last time King's Landing was sacked. It's everything building up. It's the tension that's been sowed here since, Robert's death in book 1. It's everything that's built there. Everything that we saw with Ned Stark's death and how the people kind of turned on Ned and wanted to see him killed for the entertainment and Joffrey giving it to them. It's all coming full circle now. As we get into page 451, Tyrek Lannister is also still missing, as is the High Septon's crystal crown. 9 gold cloaks were killed, 40 more were wounded, and no count of how many commoners died. Tyrion orders Bywater to find Tyrek alive or dead, as his father was always kind to him. And it's also family. It's about the image. It's everything that Tywin is going to reinforce later on in the story, especially when he gets back and he's also still trying to find out about Tyrek. It's very suspicious that Tyrek and also this crown go missing, and Varys is nowhere to be found. Now, Tyrion doesn't care about the crown that much, which I totally get. And in terms of the city is about to fall, the people in your family are being attacked and savaged, all that stuff, it's not nearly as important right now. But Bywater then turns to Tyrion, warning him grimly, "We held the city today, but I make no promises for the morrow. And the thing that's really important to understand is the Gold Cloaks cannot keep the law in the city. They can't keep it all down. They don't have enough men. And also you have people of unfit loyalty. A lot of these men who Janos Slynt, he moved up the number of the Gold Cloaks and he did all this stuff. But these are men that are maybe not the most trustworthy, as Jacqueline Bywater will talk about here in a little bit. But Jacqueline Bywater notes that crime and lawlessness are rampant. Houses are unsafe. Everybody's looking for food, coin, anything that they can get their hands on. The bloody flux is spreading in Pisswater Bend, and there's no food available for any price. It doesn't matter how rich you are, there's no food to be found. Open talk of treason is now heard in guild halls and markets, not just gutters. Before, maybe in, say, the end of book 1, starting of this book, people might have whispered, right, keeping their voices low, but now it's open. It's like you going to the bar and just openly talking about, we should go for Stannis because the Lannisters, they can't give us any food, and there's unrest, and Joffrey's a bastard, and there's incest going on. That's open talk now. No longer is that being hidden. People are desperate. Tyrion asks if more men would help, but Bywater says not really. He doesn't trust half his current men. They're mostly brutes, drunkards, cowards, and traitors from Janos Slynt's mass recruitment. He can't rely upon them to actually do things well, and that's kind of reflected in what we saw in the state of the Riot. A lot of the men, whether it be Kingsguard, Gold Cloaks, they're not reliable to make the right decisions in panics and things of that nature. And I do want to preference this. You do not know how you would act in a situation like this. So as much as it's easy for me to go, oh yeah, don't chop a dude's hand off because it's going to incite violence, it's hard to think about how you would react in that situation. But Bywater continues saying many are undisciplined, loyal only to their own survival, and they'll likely break in a battle. And Tyrion admits once the walls fall, it's over. He's known that all the time. He's known that from the very beginning, and that's the truth. If there seems to be a point where Stannis is going to win in the coming battle for the Blackwater, King's Landing will turn. And Bywater continues. You got to remember, a lot of the Gold Cloaks are being people that are recruited from the small folk, are the poorest, that are looking for meals, that are looking for a way to get out of their current situation. And Bywater continues going that, they suffer with the rest. They might be getting fed a little bit better, and they might be armored a bit better because of being in the Gold Cloaks, but this is still their family and friends we're talking about that are being forced to starve to death. At this point, there is deep resentment for House Lannister, not only because of the current situation, in terms of them not being fed, all that stuff, but you also got to remember the history of House Lannister. House Lannister sacked King's Landing. Many of the families living in King's Landing still will have been affected by that situation. And you also got to remember the way that whole thing ended. Jaime killing Aerys, the murder of Rhaegar's children. You have Joffrey's cruelty and the way he's now presenting himself to the crowd, and also the way Ned Stark's execution was handled. Ned was executed on a very sacred place. Baelor and the Sept of Baelor, he represented trying to have peace and things of that nature. And Ned was killed on those very steps and those things. It's something that's going to fuel the plot for A Feast for Crows and the public turning to religion and all of that stuff and turning to kind of fanaticism and going against Cersei and the crown. And people are beginning to be nostalgic about past rulers. We talked about this with Arya in her, before she gets to Harrenhal arc, and I believe it's Arya 6, where people are thinking about Aerys, how there was so much peace during his reign and prosperity. People are now are being reminded of Robert and his reign and how there was peace and prosperity then. And people start to say, well, Joffrey, who is allegedly not even the son of Robert, is doing a horrible job. Maybe we should go back to Stannis and the actual Baratheons who would treat us better. Tyrion asks if they hate him too, and Bywater replies, ask your eunuch. But this is where we get to the key of it. As we get into page 452, Tyrion learns the real truth. Tyrion knows that they resent him, but maybe not as much as he should. Tyrion presses Bywater, saying he's asking him. And Bywater answers plainly and truthfully. A lot of people would not have the guts to say this. He says, you most of all, my lord. The people blame Tyrion for filling the city with sellswords and savages, exiling Jaina Slint, and imprisoning wise and gentle Pycelle, and possibly plotting to seize the throne. And you gotta remember, this is all about perception. It's why I think Tyrion is such an interesting character for Daenerys, because everything that Tyrion is experiencing here, where Tyrion has the interest of the people, in mind, right? He is actually doing a lot more than people like Cersei, Joffrey, all these other people that don't care about them at all. Tyrion is trying his best. And the people hate him for it because of perception. And when we look at Daenerys, she's going to have this same type of deal, right? She's bringing over Dothraki, who they're going to view as savages. She's bringing over sellswords in their eyes with the Unsullied. It's the same type of things. And so when you look at this, the way Tyrion is going to view it when we get into the later books, I find that dynamic to be so interesting. And for Tyrion, this is shocking to him because Joffrey is the person that they should be blaming. But Joffrey is excused for being a boy and not being in his manhood yet. He's not a man yet. And Cersei and Varys were around when times were better under Robert. Even though they're not loved, they were still here and things were fine. Tyrion is the only new key. But again, that's not looking at the fact that we're in the middle of a civil war. It's just that people are looking for someone to blame, and Tyrion was chosen. Tyrion is crushed and even thinks, perhaps my lord father was right to despise me all these years, if this is the best I can achieve. He rejects his meal in disgust and calls for Podrick, ordering him to bring Varys and Bronn. But if you're Tyrion, you're being a little hard on yourself. Tyrion has done a lot of really great things. Think about what he's been able to accomplish. He has taken all the power away from Cersei, given it to himself so that he can act and make the decisions that need to be made. He has very much defended King's Landing as the best he can and prepared it for war. There's nothing he can do about the food shortages. He set in motion the alliances for the Lannisters to be set up with both Dorne and the Tyrells, things that blow up in the Lannister faces, not because of Tyrion, but because of characters like Joffrey, Tywin, Cersei, all those characters. Tyrion then reflects bitterly on, thinking about who his most trusted advisors are, being a eunuch, a sellsword, and his lady is a whore. It shows the company that Tyrion has. He can't trust anyone around him, and that's what he longs for companionship and people that actually care about him. Bronn arrives annoyed by the dark room and lights a fire, and Varys shortly follows after as Tyrion vents, my nephew is not fit to sit a privy, let alone the Iron Throne. As Varys coolly responds, an apprentice must be taught his trade. And again, Tyrion understands Joffrey's a horrible king. He will always be a horrible king. It doesn't matter if he grows up. He will always be the same person. If he even lives long enough to see manhood, Varys tries to say the opposite approach. Maybe he just needs to learn for a while. But obviously, that's not going to work. Bronn insolently starts eating Tyrion's untouched food, saying, city's starving, it's a crime to waste. We see some classic great lines from Bronn, and Bronn just keeps going. At this point, Bronn is realizing the state of the city, and Tyrion is not putting up with it. When Tyrion glares at him, Bronn casually asks for wine. As we get into page 453, the last of the chapter, Bronn continues eating Tyrion's meal without shame as Tyrion warns him, "You go too far," and Bronn replies bluntly, "And you never go far enough." And this is interesting because Bronn is going to suggest something that is going to be a key point of Book 3. Bronn starts to suggest if life would be easier if Tommen were king, calling him obedient and pliable. And this is interesting because Bronn doesn't straight up just say, "Oh, let's kill Joffrey," but he understands the situation. If Tommen was king, we'd be in a far better situation. But it also is implying that we should assassinate a king. And if this is something you're sitting here and you're going, Varys is hearing this, and Varys could easily use this stuff later on at Tyrion's trial. But it's something that Tyrion doesn't think about. He's deeply disturbed by this, recognizing that Bronn is implying Joffrey would have to die for that to happen. Tyrion reminds Bronn, "I could have your head off for saying that," but Bronn just laughs it off. But it's important to understand, if you are somebody else, and you're thinking about this, you're thinking the same thing. It's why the Tyrells think what they think. It's why, for instance, Tywin maybe might have been thinking the same thing, why he instantly starts trying to coach up Tommen to be a good king. It's all of that stuff there that's so relevant to the story that, foreshadows what we see with Book 3. It's why I love Book 2 so much, because Book 2 is able to handle building the plot, having huge, great moments like this chapter, and then foreshadowing things to come in the third book. Varys intervenes, trying to de-escalate, telling them to not quarrel and all of that stuff. But Tyrion has had enough. He is completely destroyed right now with the inner turmoil going on. The tension is growing, and we leave on quite a dramatic note, as the tension will continue to boil over all the way until the Battle of the Blackwater. This chapter does a great job of paying off the first, really 9, I'd say 8 chapters leading into the 9th chapter, and giving us a big climax moment before we even get to the Battle of the Blackwater, which is the true climax of Tyrion's story. I really love this chapter. It's a great chapter, and it's not one that I necessarily thought was instantly going to be in my top 5 of the book. Right now, it's ranked, I believe, as my number 3 chapter of the first 41 that we're in right now. I really like this one. It really gets the main part of the story going. Not main part of it, but it starts getting the second... It starts getting the back third of the book going. And one thing I really note that I really love that George does is George always places weaker chapters around the stronger chapters. It seems like he knows. Daenerys 3 is a bottom, probably 10 chapter of the book. But then it's placed next to Tyrion and how fantastic his chapter is. A great Catelyn chapter. And then also we're going to get Davos 2, which is one of the best chapters of the book and of the series as well. Just a great chapter, great section of the story we're in. We're getting to some of my favorite chapters of the entire series, and I hope you guys are all ready, because we're really hitting into that back 30 chapters of the book, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.